So, tonight we're talking about HBCUs, and I thought that, um, I thought that would be a great topic, to talk about. There's a lot in the news about what's happening with curriculum in the schools, especially geared, curriculum that's geared towards Black history, even though this is not about Black history, but, it's still a good topic to talk about in terms of as we can see, there are a lot of people have a lot of thoughts and information, and just to kind of set the record straight with certain things, and maybe learn some new things that we didn't know about before about HBCUs. As we know that HBCUs, really stem from before they got their start before the Civil War. And it was because Black Americans, the children of slaves, or they weren't allowed a formal education, especially in the establishments, white establishments in school. So the first HBCU is recorded to be as far back as I think 1837, and Pennsylvania, and then from there were others that came along the way. Some were, by bequest, others were privately put together. And in 1965, after years and decades of the establishment of HBCUs, it was recognized in 1965. The historically Black colleges and universities actually got its title, recognized under the Higher Education Act. And then it was expanded with federal funding for college and universities. So, this is the formation of HBCUs. It's really, I don't want to say old, but it's decades, and it very, has a history. And though they originated from, a place where Black youth and, young too, wasn't just at the beginning, wasn't just for the college or university, but primary and secondary education. This was the only place where a Black youth could have an education. They've expanded, and we'll hear more about that, and they've become more diverse in themselves. But tonight we will hear more specifics about HBCUs. Our presenters are tonight Janice Herbert Carter, class of 1973. She's the chair and professor of the Department of Medical Education at Morehouse School of Medicine in Atlanta, Georgia. We also have Ernestine Williams Duncan, class of 1979. She's a professor of psychology and faculty ombuds at Norfolk State University in Norfolk, Virginia. And we have Ronald Akins, class of 1986, and he's a trademark attorney in U.S. Patent and Trademark Office in Washington, D.C. So, I'm gonna turn this over to Ron, and he can start our discussion about HBCUs.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Ron Akins, and class of 86. I came into Hunter. My mother saw an article in the newspaper, and we had just moved to New York City, and the article said this is a new school where they're teaching some new ways of learning, and she got an idea from the article that this is one of the best places to be. My mother, being such a wonderful person, said, this is where you need to go. It didn't matter what I was thinking, because mommy is mommy. She said, this is where you want to go. We have an interview, and I got into the school in the elementary school. My time at Hunter went from Hunter Elementary through Hunter High School. During that time, I wasn't traditionally aware of my standing as far as where in the Black community, because my mother was always deeply immersed. So my everyday was going to Grambling games, was talking about the Progressive Black Caucus, was being a young man walking through New York City in the 70s and 80s. And so I was never thinking about my space or where I fit in, because it was a constant. The 80s and the 70s and 80s in New York City was brown and gray and tough. So it didn't hit me until sometime in high school. I'm hanging out with a lot of the other students, and I was always surrounded by engineers, people who were, or young men who were doing engineers. There were other Black students. They were having a basketball team. I was on the volleyball team. It didn't hit me that I needed to be a little bit more aware of my place within the school and representing our culture. I wasn't doing anything wrong, but I could have done more. My head was, let me get to some place comfortable so I can take care of my mom, because I was being raised by my mom. I just want to make sure that I got to a place that allowed her to be no longer worried about her young Black son. And so I focused on mathematics, engineering. I eventually went into economics because my friends were geniuses and I didn't see myself in the same vein, and I kind of got tired of engineering, so I went to economics. It doesn't sound like it's much of a difference, slightly different, but I applied to quote unquote mainstream schools. I thought about MIT, but I realized that was not going to be my place because I no longer want to be an engineer. But I thought about a couple of places after that. It was Duke, UPenn, and Dartmouth. Dartmouth because my grandma saw a movie with Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan was in Dartmouth, and she thought it was the most beautiful thing she ever seen, the campus, and she loved the old movies, grandma. So I applied, and that was the place I got in, that one place. I'm thinking, because I'm coming from New York and I'm used to seeing all of the cultures, I'm used to all the food, I'm used to all the people, I'm used to all the flowing, and not really worried about a particular group, mostly because I see everybody every day and I learned how to maneuver through. But when I got to Dartmouth, they let me know that I didn't belong because of the color of my skin. That was day one. The day two, my roommate, whom I didn't realize was Native American, but he's from Oklahoma, and he was incensed behind things happening. He was more awake than I was. I found myself in a situation that I was told was alive there, because Dartmouth has the history of having a lot of situations with cultural clashes and such. And I was told when I was a prospective weekend, if you're not ready to fight with us, don't bother coming here. Right? That's what they said to us before we got on campus formally. We were at the prospective weekend. They said, we're in a struggle here. If you were going to be part of our struggle, we welcome you. If not, you can move on. This was the headset moving into this. I got to Dartmouth and I continued on with my studies, and my understanding, my learning, and the community was very tight, and I learned how to lead. I learned how to follow, learned how to lead, and learned how all that works so that we could bring people forward. But I also got tired. It was a 4-year struggle. There was never a moment when I wasn't looking over my shoulder, when I wasn't second guessing who I was, or second guessing my place in that community, wasn't second guessing what my career path was going to be, second guessing everything about me. It sits heavily on you as you try to study, as you try to learn about yourself, as you try to learn about others, you try to date, try to party, as you try to keep your grades to a place where your mom is not losing it because you're so far away, but don't seem focused, and having to explain, Mom, I'm in a fight. She didn't send me there to fight. She sent me there to learn. And I spent a lot of time in that world, and I needed a break. When I came out, I spent a year between Dartmouth and law school. And quite frankly, I had my dream job. I did. I was working at Marvel Comics. I taught myself to draw in high school, and I got an internship when I was in high school. And before I came out of college, on the last, like a month before graduating, they called me and they asked if I wanted to come in and be an artist. I said, I'm an economist, but yeah, that's perfect because I'm not exactly sure where I'm going. But in that break time between after Dartmouth and with my art behavior in school and my learning that I was teaching in other younger students and being part of these movements, that I could argue quite well, law seemed to be the area. And I had a chance or an opportunity to choose where I wanted to go. One of my mentors was just an upperclassman, but somebody that I respected heavily. I said, I have these choices. And I said, one of them is Howard Law. And he said, I understand your choices. And I understand that these other schools are excellent schools. But every attorney that I've seen come out of Howard has been fierce. And I think you should think about being in that world because I think you can succeed. That person telling me I could succeed, that person I respected was, I think he's in charge of a school system in Detroit now, hit heavily with me. And I went and visited Howard, and the breath that I was allowed to take from just being in an environment where one aspect of the daily grind was no longer sitting on my shoulders, let me know I could be a different person. I wasn't used to me not under a grind. Attending Howard allowed me to breathe for a moment. I didn't have to be the person who spoke for our people in a classroom. I didn't have to be the person people turn to in a classroom. I didn't have to walk through this campus wondering if I should belong. I was there, or I could see I could be there, and then once I was there, with people who that all washed away. So then it was just my intellect, how I could argue, whether or not I could stand in the same room and gain the respect of these people. And that was a whole different me. My whole personality changed. Howard wasn't the perfect place. It can't be a perfect place. There isn't any school that is perfect. And you can never be quite sure what you're going for, what's going to happen when you get to a particular institution. You're always going to find friends. You're always going to find a culture for you. You're going to always find a way of handling things. But when you can walk into a space and immediately feel that you'll have a chance to see the other side of you. Well, for me, it was eye-opening. It was cathartic, and so I needed to be there so that I could more likely be the me that I wish to be. So Howard was a beautiful experience for me. It wasn't perfect. The monies weren't perfect. Some of the facilities weren't perfect. We can talk about that later on if you wish to ask me about those things. We had to make some fights. We had to talk about our libraries, and we had to push. But every day I was with people, not just one or two, not just a tight group who was in the foxhole with each other, but a group of people who were looking towards leading. And they said, "You're a leader." And they said, "You're somebody we want to listen to, and you listen to us. And when we get further ahead in this life, we're all going to be together, and I'll always support you." The people I had at Dartmouth, most of them I'm not still in contact with on a regular basis. There are two or three who are like family. But at Howard, anybody I want to contact, anybody will take my call and say, "What's up, Ron?" It doesn't have to be that I spoke to them last week. It just has to be that I have a need. It became a brother, sister, family. Let's all move forward. The first among equals. Let's leave the world a better place than we we received it. That was the constant. Having Thurgood Marshall over the head, being in moot court rooms where his bust was over here, and people were trying to live up to that standard. It was a lovely experience for me. It was a lovely experience, and coming off my very high level, very wonderfully academic, but stressful experience at Dartmouth, this allowed me to breathe and become the attorney that I wish to be. There are things that I have done since then that aren't quite that I put on the resume that is extensive, where I'm with the Trademark Trial and Appeal Board, or where I'm doing briefs for the Federal Circuit, or such, or where I had to be in front of a federal court myself. All that strength, aside from that coming from my wife, whom I met in law school, thank you very much, that came from learning from the people in that same situation, where some of them came from other HBCUs, undergrad, but they were all with an understanding of we can always carry each other forward. So what I did not know, or what I did not internalize when I was at Hunter, was that the sense of community that I was looking for was actually out there. I didn't know I was missing something. And we can all go through life that way sometimes. Sometimes it's where we don't realize our pet's going to save us, or kids are going to save us, or a particular new job, because we were on one path, and that new job lets us be the wonderful person we wish to be. But I didn't realize I was missing something. And being at Howard allowed me to fill in gaps that I think would have become insurmountable fissures later on in life. I can't be sure, because I didn't have to encounter them, thankfully. But I know what I was. I know how I was becoming with the pressures and the self-doubt that is fostered by being in the high-level environment, but not feeling like you're always supposed to be there. Because they told me that I was supposed to be there, and not just me, all the students. But you don't have to struggle all the time. And it's not the way the world works. So the environment that I saw at Howard is not going to be the environment that I encountered when I got outside, unless I had my own shingle and went to a firm and created a firm with these individuals. But I was able to take a break and foster me for a moment while learning from high-level instructors, professors, people who were writing wonderful works, who were inspirational, who knew people who were inspirational, who could speak to all the history and could give context to everything in history and in my life. Some of those things I did not get, and I know for certain I did not get in my undergrad experience. Being in the 80s and 70s, when I was in Hunter, there was no way some of that was going to come forward, because the life was different. The world was a different place, and what was given to us was not what's given to us now. What was offered to us, or what was available, is not what's offered now, because of social media and the internet and things like that. But without those digital works to enhance my ability to learn for myself, the environment in Howard was able to do all those things in real time. It was a life-changing experience that I'm blessed to have had. I'm blessed to have had. Again, I met my wife there, some of my best friends there. My groomsmen were there. I partied there. I studied there. I was in the library all the time. I learned how to argue there. I have people who are judges and heads of and bars, and those people take my calls and chat me up about nothing today. Just nothing. Just here's the game. What's your son doing? What's your daughter doing? Where are they going? Are we going to see you at a picnic? Are we going to, this person's become a pastor now. I get to see all of that, and all that excellence allows me to breathe.
Well,
And
thank you, Ron. Oh,
don't know,
okay. I know, Ron,
they
that
won't know if they need that moment to breathe. But I tell you, there's an aspect to being an HBCU that you can't get from other mainstream other schools, only because of the actual makeup. Now, in that situation, it's usually the stats are flipped. So within those communities, who's a minority, who's a majority, flips. But you still see everybody. It's just that everybody deals with everybody in a different way, because the people who are normally in the majority are now not so much or not at all, and they interact differently. But typically, the people who are there so desperately want to be there, no matter what their ethnicity is. Everybody's chill. So now I'm meeting people who I've met, police officers and people who are tax accountants and tax lawyers, who would normally be at home at Harvard, who desperately wanted to get this experience for whatever their personal reasons. And I see them, I can hug them. I know that they understand, because they had to deal with the same struggles I had to deal with, and they understood what it was like to be in a situation where they were no longer in a position of power. And so or in a position that's normally of strength. And so knowing that that person is also another person I can rely on allows you to be more relaxed as you move forward in other parts of life. So what becomes in where your sensitivities are changes also. I'm less offended by things. I'm less worried about things. I can identify this person is what we call now an ally. This person is going to love me just because they ask me a question. It's not personal. It's just because they want to know. And I can now identify that person's not challenging me as a human being. They're just trying to see where my head is at. And then we're going to go get some food. And that is awesome. And that is awesome. And I got most of that from being there. I got some of that from being at Dartmouth. But I got most of that from being at Howard. And if I understand correctly, that was an experience that a lot of people have. And to this day, it's like we have inside jokes with folks. You say, you talk about going to a particular administrative building for financial aid to go get your check. We all have the same conversation. Every last one of us had the exact same experience over the time that we all had. It's been, whether it's today or 15 years past my time, we all have the same experience. I wish it could have changed, but at least I know when I speak to the students now, because I've gone back to teach and I've gone back to talk to the students, that the connection is through and forever. And it's not two people from my college. It's several hundred and several thousand. I can walk down the street with my Howard Law, my Bison shirt on, and I've got family, because people will approach me and grip me up and say,
well, thank you, Ron. I know there's a lot to share about your experience, especially the sense of community. So I want to continue that conversation with Ernestine, and she could talk about her experiences. And of course, in the discussion, we can talk more about, what everybody felt, and, answer some questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Judy. Thank you, Ron. Good evening, everybody. I am Ernestine Duncan, and as you can see, I'm on the lovely campus of Norfolk State University. We are located in southeastern Virginia. That's Norfolk or Hampton Roads, if people are familiar with that at all. I've been a member of the faculty at NSU for 22 years this year. And I went all around the mulberry bush to get to my HBCU. I am a graduate of Hunter, class of 1979. I share that with Judy. And much like Ron, my parents told me I was going to Hunter. Once I took the test and I was admitted, I didn't want to go. I grew up in Brooklyn, in Bed-Stuy, and I had to take what seemed like 35 trains to get to 40 2nd Street. That's where we were at that time. And I just didn't want to go. My parents gave me no options. And so to Hunter, I went. I graduated from Hunter in 79, and I went to Oberlin College. Today, I will tell you that I went to Oberlin because they are known as being the first institution in the United States that admitted Black students. Also, the first institution in this country to admit women. With that, Oberlin had a very strong liberal tradition, and I found myself there with a lot of like-minded people. It was almost like being at an HBCU because of the students that were attracted to Oberlin College. And so I spent 4 years there, and it was a really safe space to be in college in the early 80s. And there were issues that came up, but we were a strong community of students of color, and it was a liberal administration. And so we got through that. Fast forward to 83, I got accepted to graduate school in clinical psychology at Georgia State University. Thought it was a great place to go. I was going to be in Atlanta. People talked about Atlanta being the Black Mecca. I really wanted to be there. I got there. Anything about clinical psychology, we take really small classes. So I was admitted to a class of 6 students. Well, I was one of 2 women and the only Black student. And it was a very different experience. I would share with Ron, who said, you're being told out the gate that you don't belong there, or that if you were there, it was on the basis of some type of affirmative action and that you were lucky to be there. One of the things that really made it such that I had to grow up quickly was that in a class of 6 students, my advisor not only never learned my name, he called me another student's name, another Black student who was in a class maybe 2 or 3 years ahead of me. Coming straight out of college, being young, that was very, very hurtful to me. It suggested to me that I did not have an identity that was distinct, that he was not invested in my success at Georgia State. And I realized in retrospect that I think maybe it might have been orchestrated, because there were many students who admitted to that program, never completed that program. The way that I was able to survive was that I would leave. So a typical graduate program in psychology, doctoral program, should take you about 5 to 7 years to complete. I took 10. And that is because I used every excuse that I could to take a break. Getting married, I'm gonna take a little bit of time off. I had my daughter, I'm gonna take a little bit of time off. And so those were the breaks that I created for myself to be able to manage the kinds of things that were happening for me over the course of my matriculation at Georgia State. While a student there, it was my first opportunity to engage with an HBCU, and it was very fortunate for me. I served as an adjunct faculty member in the Department of Psychology at Spelman College, an all-women's college. I was really interested in doing that because I was the last class of females at Hunter. And so this was very attractive to me. But when I got there, I encountered not only some of the brightest young women I had ever met in my life, but the discipline that these young women had in coming to class. They knew what was expected of them. They came ready to meet the demands of what was expected of them. And it was my first teaching experience. And it really made me know that I wanted to teach. Fast forward me then to my internship, which was in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Um, a lot of the same types of experiences I had had at Georgia State, but I graduated and found myself in need of a job. Luckily, as a psychologist, you're trained to be an academician, a clinician, and a researcher. So I had a lot of options for myself looking at jobs. And so in the meantime, my parents decided they were going to retire from New York and they were going to relocate to Hampton Roads, which is where I am now. And I'm like, what a great, I know, I'll move to Hampton Roads and we'll be together again as one big happy family. So I applied to jobs teaching, doing research, and clinical positions. The things that materialized for me were teaching. I was offered a full-time position at Hampton University, which is an HBCU, and it's a private HBCU. And they often refer to themselves as the Harvard of the South, right? So I was very fortunate that that was then my second teaching appointment. But also, because I was new to this area, I looked at Norfolk State University, another HBCU, but public. And I found myself in these two very different environments, but with the common idea that we were an HBCU. So there were some differences and there were some similarities. I ended up, after 3 years, moving full-time to Norfolk State University. And as I said, I've been here for 22 years. From the faculty perspective, because I think a lot of times we talk about the perspective and the benefits of HBCUs for students, that it gives us a sense of community, it gives us a sense of pride, but we don't talk that often about the position of faculty members, right? And why we choose to be at an HBCU. For many of us, it is much more than just a teaching career. It is much more than just the passion that we have for teaching. It becomes a mission. It becomes why you're here, your purpose. There are many things that are different for us as faculty members at HBCUs than there would be at another institution. We refer to PWIs. One of those is that when you understand the history of an HBCU and you know that HBCUs were established so that Black students could go to college, they could learn. Well, they would go into college and they could learn what? Because then when they graduated from college, what kinds of things would they do? So we teach more than we tend to teach. There are institutions, Norfolk State is one of them, where we tend to teach more than we do research. Howard's going to talk to you about the fact that they are a research powerhouse. But many of us come from institutions, we serve at institutions where our mission, our purpose is to teach. And so we find ourselves with much heavier teaching loads than other schools. So for example, one of our peer institutions here in Hampton Roads is William and Mary. Many people know about William and Mary, and I look at my colleagues at William and Mary who have sometimes a 3-3 or a 3-2 teaching load. What that refers to is how many courses you teach in a semester. And generally for them, they can teach 3 courses and then 2 courses, and that's their academic year. 3 courses in the fall, 2 courses in the spring, and that's their workload. My workload at Norfolk State has always been 4 and 4. 4 classes in the fall, 4 classes in the spring. And that is because the majority of our responsibility has to do with teaching. And with teaching, there also comes a heavy load of advisement. And if that advisement was simply about you need to take these courses as prerequisites for the next course, then maybe it would not be so intensive. However, our advisement also concerns ourselves with all of the caregiving that our students do. Norfolk State University is a university that is seen as a university with non-traditional students. So we have students that are typically older than the 18 to 22 cohorts that you see at other colleges. Our students primarily go to school as well as work. They care for parents, they care for children, they care for spouses. They have so many competing stressors, so many competing demands that many times, if you didn't understand the culture, you would think that they didn't take their education seriously. But the point is that how much more serious can you be about obtaining an education when you do it and know that you have all of these other things that demand your attention? I am grateful to be at Norfolk State University because it allows me, similar to Spelman, to deal with some of the brightest minds that are matriculating at colleges anywhere. I am sometimes disappointed and disheartened by people who feel as though HBCUs are a default, or they are a second choice for students because they can't go someplace else. Many people don't understand that HBCUs are the largest producers of college graduates in the country. We take students who are sometimes less prepared. We take students that have competing challenges, and yet they get the nurturing and they get the academic rigor that allows them to persist and to graduate within the 6-year average for colleges. The last time I looked, the numbers were something like 66% come from HBCUs, while about 30% come from other institutions. There are questions that have to do with, can other students, non-Black students, matriculate at HBCUs? Of course they can. HBCUs are open and appreciative and value all students. They were established because we could not go other places. So right now, the numbers say about 7% of students at HBCUs are white. What's happening at Norfolk State is a trend that we see across other HBCUs, and we're getting an increase in international students. And so it is just a diverse space where students can come and be valued and appreciated, not only for what they bring academically, but the diverse backgrounds that they bring to the institutions. So it has really been a job for me. It has been a mission for me. It has been a purpose for me. And it has allowed me to enhance my family, because just as Ron says, you talk about students who form friendships and relationships, not only with each other, they form them with us. And so I have students who on social media still reach out, want to let me know how they're doing, because they found out along the way that I, along with my colleagues, truly cared about them. Graduation is such a celebratory time for us, not only because they're getting that piece of paper, but because you get to meet the mother that they told you about when they were in your office hours. You get to see the extended family, the fictive kin, the godmothers, the aunties, the people who have no biological blood relationship with them, but yet have played an integral role in them being able to complete the mission of college graduation. And so I'll stop there because I think there'll probably be some questions related to my experience through an HBCU, but I am proud to be a faculty member at an HBCU I feel like it is something that was appointed for me in my lifetime, and I'm trying to pay it forward.
So I'm saying thank you, Ernestine, for sharing your story. Before we move on to Janice, I just want to let people make people aware that there's the chat has some information that you could take a look at. There's a reference to a book and some other factual information that's being shared in the chat. And one of the things I wanted to add to what Ernestine was saying in terms of the HBCU, their at least the way she's at, their prominent goal is to teach. You know, that in terms of the original formation of HBCUs, it was to create educators, to teach, for teachers and tradesmen, so to go out and teach other Black youth. So that's, you know, history behind that. So let's move on to Janice, and she could share her story with us.
Thank you. So first, I got to give a shout out to my friends who are here to support me. So I see Michelle, class of 71, Jackie, class of 72, Bev, 71. I see Katrina, who went to Princeton with me, and I see John Stevens, who also went to Princeton with me. So thank you guys for being here. Also call attention to the fact that I'm wearing purple and white to represent Hunter, okay? Ditto everything they said. But I'll go back to elementary school. I'm first generation college. My parents did not have the privilege of going to college. They were first generation high school in their family, first people to graduate from high school. So they believed in education. And my mom wanted me to get the best education possible in elementary school, and she tried to get me into Hunter Elementary School, and she couldn't. So first she was told through the grapevine, I guess, well, you have to live in Manhattan. You can't live in Brooklyn. And Bed-Stuy, I'm from Halsey Street, Ernestine. So she used my aunt's address. People may still do that to get their kids into schools. I don't know, but that was common back in the day.
Yeah.
But my aunt lived on Amsterdam Avenue and 145th Street. She was told, oh yeah, that's Manhattan, but that's still too far away. Okay, Harlem. It's too far away for an elementary school kid to go. So she couldn't get me into Hunter Elementary, but she somehow found the best public elementary school in Brooklyn, which was PS 208. And they had music, and they had Spanish, and they had typing, which at the time, typing was, a big deal. There were no computers. Computers didn't exist. And they had Spanish. So they had a really enriched curriculum. She got me in there, and she had to, talk to people and get the principal to accept me and get the district superintendent to let me go from my neighborhood, but she got me in there and I did well. And I didn't know anything about Hunter, had never heard of Hunter. I was going to go to Meyer 11 Elementary School with all my friends. And one day she just told me, you're taking this test to go to Hunter. And I did. And the next thing I know, I was told, you're going to Hunter. It didn't bother me. Like Ron said, he didn't want to travel to Hunter. That didn't bother me at all. I was already traveling on a half an hour on the number 46 bus, Utica Avenue bus. Jackie's dad worked for the transit system, so she knows. I was already doing that because there were no school buses that I could take because I was the only kid in my neighborhood who was going to that mostly white school. So I was already used to travel. Where I lived, I could either catch the A train, the Ralph Avenue station, and then change when I got to Lower Manhattan, or I could take the J or the QJ going down Broadway. Didn't matter, either way. And so I went to Hunter. I enjoyed Hunter. I had friends Back in the day, there was more of a concept of third world. So it wasn't just the Black girls, and it was all girls then. It wasn't just the Black girls. I had friends who were Puerto Rican, Dominican, Japanese. I even had white friends. And it was just a concept of we're all in this together. And I enjoyed hunting. Did not get good guidance counseling. My guidance counselor told me, you're going to punch out of college because you like to play bid whist too much. And for those of you who may not be familiar, y'all younger folks only play spades, and other folks may not play bid whist. But yeah, it's a card game. And when I started out, we were at 68th and Lexington, but by the time I got to 10th grade, we were on Lexington between 45th and 46th. And so we had the 14th floor lounge. And I chose not to graduate early. You know, I don't know about how things are now, but they had the Regents diploma that, yeah, Michelle, I see you in the chat. They had the Regents diploma, which everybody at Hunter finished their Regents requirements to graduate from high school by 11th grade. But I chose not to graduate early because I was having fun. And so senior year, I was taking all AP classes and playing bid whist. And my guidance counselor told me, you're going to punch out of college. He also gave me very bad advising, only advising me to apply to colleges that had 6-year BSMD programs, because I was pre-med. And that would have been a disaster. Fortunately, I was in a program at NYU on Saturdays for underrepresented minorities who wanted to be pre-med, and it was at NYU Medical School. And they gave us like enrichment classes, and I took microbiology and, you know, stuff that you don't get in ordinary New York City high schools. And they had guidance counselors for us. Now, they only advised me to apply to Ivies. Well, almost. I also applied to Swarthmore and Williams. But, you know, Princeton, Radcliffe, because girls couldn't go to Harvard at the time. Princeton, Radcliffe, you know, those schools. My father wanted me to go to Dartmouth because he had heard of Dartmouth because his favorite guy on the radio had gone to Dartmouth. You had to know my dad. But anyway, I ended up at Princeton. Beautiful campus. I had visited it once. It was gorgeous campus. I was like, oh yeah, this is going to be great. I wasn't too far from home. Wrong choice. I survived. But I really believe if I had gone to an HBCU, I would have thrived, not just survived. But what the best thing about Princeton, and to this day, is the friends I made. And some of them are on this Zoom right now. So thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I would not have survived Princeton without my friends. I applied to medical schools. I had an interview at Howard. This is how life-changing this was, okay? I remember the exact day. It was September 19th, 1976. And I got to Howard, I had my interview, and I was interviewed by the chair of the Department of Biochemistry, who was a Black man. Now, I was a biochem major at Princeton. Just like Ron said, from day one, I was made to feel you do not belong here. We just let you in. Now, I graduated from Hunter College High School, one of the top high schools in the whole United States. Okay, they didn't do class rank back then, but my average, you know, my grade average was a 95 from Hunter, one of the best high schools in the country. But no, we just let you in. That's what they try to make you feel, like you don't belong here. Okay, I had professors who I went to ask a question, and this guy stood me down, told me, you're not in my class, because this was an advanced chemistry class. This was P-Chem, John. This was Professor Whipke. And his wife taught freshman chemistry. And he insisted, oh no, you're confused. You must be in my wife, that Professor Whipke's class. I couldn't possibly be in an advanced chemistry class. So the whole time I was made to feel you don't belong, okay? When we had to stay in the biochem lab late at night to, keep working on experiments, Princeton doesn't have any sororities or fraternities. They have eating clubs. And of course, not many Black people are in the eating clubs. Just about all the white people in the biochem department were in one eating club. They would call up their club, and then you would see a procession, I'm very serious, a procession of Black servants coming into the building. You know how you hold the tray with the dome, the silver dome on it, carrying trays of food for them to eat. Meanwhile, I'm working in the lab until like 9, 10 o'clock at night, hungry, but you didn't dare leave your experiment because one of them would sabotage it. That's how cutthroat it was. Okay, so I get to Princeton, I get to Howard for my interview, and the chair of the Department of Biochemistry is a Black man. They toured us around the school. I see people just walking up and down the hall, Black folks everywhere, okay? Now, Howard's not 100% Black, like we said, it's diverse, but it's mostly Black. People who look like me. And then I looked in the student lounge and there were people playing bid whist. I thought I had died and gone to heaven. So I got accepted at Howard. I went to Howard for medical school. It's medical school, so it's rough. But I had a wonderful experience. And like Ron, I met my husband, he was my classmate. Jackie was with me the whole time.
I was about to interrupt and say you chased me down the first day of school and said, oh my God, the girl from Hunter.
That's right. And so we were friends all through med school. And I thrived at Howard. Fast forward many years. I've been at Morehouse School of Medicine for the past September will be 33 years. And just like Ernestine said, teaching is my passion. Now, I used to also practice medicine, but I'm old, okay? I gave up practicing in 2019, but I'm still teaching. I teach everybody from pre-med, post-bac grad students, all 4 years of medical students, PA students, residents, and faculty. I teach in faculty development. I teach them how to teach. So I'm a teacher. I have publications and presentations, but I'm not a real researcher. But one of the papers we published, I thought about when Ernestine was talking, because she was talking about how your students come in with varied credentials, but then you nurture them and then they graduate just as good as anybody else. That's what we do. We published a paper called Shifting the Curve. It's in Academic Medicine, which is one of the premier journals for medical education. It's published by the AAMC, Association of American Medical Colleges. And the paper is called Shifting the Curve. We serve an academically diverse student body, not just ethnically and other types of diversity, but academically diverse. We have students who come in with MCATs, and if you're not familiar, that's the medical college admissions test. It's like the SAT, but for medical school. And some of them come in with MCATs lower than the national average. So if you're doing a curve, they're on the left side. And our curve on admission on the MCAT is skewed to the left. But then after 2 years with us in the curriculum, when they take step 1 of the national boards, every physician in the United States has to pass steps 1, 2, and 3 of the national boards in order to get licensed to practice medicine anywhere in the United States. You take step 1 after your first 2 years, you take step 2 somewhere around end of 3rd year, somewhere in 4th year, and you take step 3 during your residency. So they come in at the left side of the curve. Our curve is shifted to the left. After 2 years of our nurturing, 2 years of our curriculum, and we call it, we're Morehouse School of Medicine, MSM, but we call it MSM. Mentoring, structure, and milieu. After 2 years with us, the curve shifts. And our students perform just as well as the national average on step 1. And then they match. You have to go through the match to find out where you're going to do your residency so that you can be in whatever specialty you want to be in. They match at excellent institutions, what you might call top tier institutions, all over the country. And our mission is to educate these folks, to produce the next generation of physicians, biomedical scientists, public health professionals, and physician assistants. Our vision statement is leading the creation and advancement of health equity. I'm not going to see health equity in my lifetime because for as many years as we've been saying, healthcare is a right, it's not a privilege. Let's be real, it is a privilege. I'm not going to live to see health equity. I know that. But my students will. They will create it. And one of the reasons, and I'm sure Ernestine is going to agree with me, one of the reasons I love teaching, my whole career has been spent serving the underserved. I had a National Health Service Corps scholarship, so I had to practice in an underserved area. I was sent to Baltimore. I was doing good stuff. I was a good physician. I was taking care of Mrs. Smith and bringing her blood sugar down, and so she's not going to get an amputation in 5 years. And Mr. Jones, I was controlling his blood pressure, so he's not going to have a stroke and end up disabled. Fine, great. But there were hundreds of Mrs. Smiths and Mr. Jones who I couldn't reach. But as a teacher, I can feel like I'm having an impact on the health and lives of every single patient that every single student I've ever taught sees. So it's like, it's just not like I'm multiplied. It's like a exponential progression. And I can have so much more impact as a teacher than I could just practicing seeing patients, day by day. And that's the folks who do that, I'm so happy and proud of. But I love teaching. It's my passion. And we nurture our students at Morehouse School of Medicine. And I know I was nurtured at Howard. I was not nurtured at Princeton. I survived, but I thrived at an HBCU, and my students thrive at Morehouse School of Medicine. And I'm very proud to be part of that. So, and I see my friends smiling and giving me thumbs up. So
thank you, Janice. So let's have some discussion now. Open up for questions. You can raise your hand. You can also put your question in the chat if you want me to ask your question. I think there was an earlier question. I'm not sure. I wrote it down. Oh, there was a question to Ron about your experience at Dartmouth, and so asking about how many Black students were at Dartmouth.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So in my particular class, there was out of 1,052, 46 were Black students, 46, everybody. a lot of us from New York. Each class was roughly 1,100 students, and about 100 in each class were Black students, and so the community was very tight. I'm still close enough with enough of the people that I see them, and I know what they're doing in the world, and they were, I hesitate to say exactly we're all in a foxhole together, but it was kind of, it was a we are in it to make this place better. Come in, take over, learn from us, take over, and keep it moving. So there were about 300 or 400 students. Now, my perspective was a little skewed. My discipline was not filled with Black students. I had 2 other Black economists in my course. I knew that there were a lot of people who were engineers. And then I was also the campus DJ. So I was doing all the parties and the radio. So I know this is gonna sound odd. I didn't know names because everybody was a dancing head to me. Everybody danced, right? So I saw a lot of people, and I knew where we were. It's just as I was moving up towards graduating that I took other positions where I worked in admissions, and I worked with admissions officers, and I did things like assisting in getting kids and students in, because the mission was then, as far as I understood and from what I was taught, was to get not only more students of color in there, but to get more recognition for the women on the campus, because the school didn't like to highlight, how do I say it? No, I said it. The things that were embraced were okay. I'll just say. So this Dartmouth was built for the education of Native Americans, but only 1% are Native American. And there are murals on the walls showing how old Eliezer Wheelock used beads and alcohol to get the land from Native Americans. And these are the kind of things that were pulled off, that they were displayed so the alumni came back and they could enjoy the murals and enjoy all this history. This is the stuff you see on a regular basis, right? So part of the job, I believe, was to change that culture. So, you know, I think it's Ernest Just, I think that's his name, Black Apollo of Science, right? So he was a Dartmouth person, and he was a founder of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated, right? So getting his photo, getting his picture up on the wall so that we can see that there's a history here, getting the women who were prominent came through on the wall so that people could feel included. That was the thing that moved me as I was transitioning out. That was where my head was, because it was a struggle, and I didn't think by that point my GPA was where it was going to be. I was a fighter and not worried about my grades because it just wasn't it wasn't a thing. When I came out of Hunter, it was great. And I couldn't explain to my mother at any time that I was not focused on my grades. Like, whatever I did, the homework better be done, things like that. So I went into that place with an average, and I was from Hunter, I had a mindset. By the time I came out, my academics didn't seem to be as important. Being able to make a difference and shift something through argument, which again, of course, led me to go into the law, because I realized that this was how I functioned. I didn't mind arguing
The point.
You might as well get paid for that.
Yes, well, thank you, Ron. We have a question, and I'm going to direct this to Ernestine, but others could jump in. I'll have Ernestine start first.
Okay.
How would you advise a Black Hunter student today, and how to evaluate where HBCUs should fit in their thinking about college?
So an interesting, I read a New York Times piece in preparation for tonight, and it talked about a Black student who had been heavily recruited and had always planned to go to an Ivy League school. At the time of her graduation, she was committing to Yale. But at at one of the events at her high school, and she was a minority student at her high school. At this event, they started singing a Kelly Clarkson song. And it just kind of got infectious and everybody was singing it. And she looked around and realized she didn't know the song. And she realized that there was no one for her to link arm in arm with, as all the other students were doing. And so when she got in the car with her mom, that after the event, she said, "I'm going to Spelman," because she realized that she had never really paid attention to it. But for all of the years of her high school experience, she had been alone and she'd been going through the motions, and she just didn't want to do that anymore. It's really interesting that I think our times are calling for students to look at where they fit more than they've ever had to do that before. The Common App says that there has been a surge of students who are indicating interest in HBCUs at about 30% increase from 2019 till now. And that's because I think students are beginning to either experience personally, or perhaps they see it through the news and other media outlets, that there are some places where it's not safe for students of color. So I think for those students who are concerned about that, definitely you want to consider an HBCU as part of your evaluation process. But I think we've also said that HBCUs are diverse. And for any student then who is interested in learning more about that experience or using their culture as a part of their academic experience, I would advise all of them to consider HBCUs.
Okay, thank you, Ernestine, for that. So, Ron talked a lot about community as a student in law school, which differed from his experience at Dartmouth. And Ernestine, you spoke a lot about you as an educator and the discipline of the students that you taught. And Janice, I was impressed with that, how you found a mentor, or you found people that would support you and encourage you and allow you to thrive, as opposed to put you down and say you didn't belong along. One of the questions here talks about, if anybody can speak to the undergraduate experience at an HBCU. Which
could I just add one thing to Ernestine's answer before that?
Yes.
You current students, I don't know who one here is current, but what I would say is you have the benefit of the internet, which we didn't have. I didn't know, my parents didn't go to college. I didn't know about HBCUs because there aren't any in New York, but you can find out where HBCUs are, and you can find out basic information about them. And when you find a school that sounds like it's in a location that you might like to be in, or their history or something is something that interests you, you can find out more about them. You can contact the school. I don't know about now, but back in the day, none of the Hunter guidance counselors knew anything about HBCUs. And only 2 of my classmates went to HBCUs for undergrad. And that was because they knew somebody already. So you're going to have to do some research your own self, but you can start with just Google, find out about HBCUs and where they are. And then for the next question, I wrote in the chat, the person who asked about somebody who went to an HBCU for undergrad, Jackie Berry, who was my classmate in medical school. She went to Hampton for undergrad.
Yeah, I'm glad I'm wearing my Hampton t-shirt. I'm a 4-H girl. I went to Hunter. I went to Hampton, and I went to Howard Med. and I have my I have my master's in public health from Hopkins. But about the undergraduate experience, I started off at New York University. I was sitting there taking the train, going to New York University, where I was in a class of something like maybe 200 people in your biology class, 300 people in your biology class. I was not doing well in school. The advisor told me, you're never going to get in med school. Don't even try. Don't think about it. Don't work on it. And I came at it and said, they're not going to do that to me. So one of my neighbors said, did you ever hear of Hampton? I said, yeah. So I ended up, I transferred after my second year at NYU to Hampton, where I walked in a classroom. There was 20 people in each class, maybe 30. When you didn't understand something, the teachers would invite you over to the house, to their backyard, and we'd sit and have journal clubs, and we'd talk about different things and things like that. Everybody said, whatever you want to do, you can do it. They supported everything we did, no matter what it was. If you were failing, you weren't going to fail, because the professor was going to give you extra work, extra books, extra something, and make sure you didn't fail. I noticed somebody else mentioned something about being Greek life. Yes, there's Greek life on the campuses, Alpha Kappa, Alpha Sorority Incorporated. But there are, in the HBCUs, each one, for example, I know that that a lot of great engineering comes out of Norfolk State. Hampton, we have an extraordinarily good nursing school, communication school. As now at Howard, the School of Communications is being run by
Alicia Rashad.
Alicia Rashad.
No, that's fine arts.
Fine arts, Alicia Rashad. But Hampton has good communications, pre-med, and definitely one of the nursing school is half white. I mean, it's one of the pre-med nursing schools in the area. So there's a lot of different experiences. I'm here in Maryland. Bowie State is up the street, Morgan. So you can look at all these schools and find out which ones give you the coursework that you want to do and go to them. And the one thing, like Ron was saying, I have friends forever and ever and ever from undergrad and of course, as Janice, my dear friend, knows, when I don't know what's happening in something in medicine, I can call her illustrious, smart husband who knows everything there is to know about anything in internal medicine, and he can hook me up with the correct people. I have any problems with any of my friends or relatives, and they say, well, they need a neurosurgeon. My classmate from Howard, who is a neurosurgeon, can tell me who's a good neurosurgeon here in DC. So we have, it's beyond network. It is a conglomeration of everybody all the time who's always together and always supportive. Okay. And also hi to Dr. Beverly Shepard is also a physician, and we're all physicians, and we're all Hunter girls.
Can I just jump in for a minute, because it's something that people have missed too about the HBCU experience. I taught at Howard Law School for 3 years, but one of the things that people don't appreciate about Howard is that they have a very high employment rate for their graduates, because all of the law firms that want to show that they do diversity go to Howard first to interview the law grads at Howard. So we never had any problems with students not having jobs post-graduation, because Howard was the Mecca, or at least that's what they teach the kids. And that's where the law firms went to get their first-year law associates. The other thing I want to say, I put it in the chat for if there's any students at Hunter on. None of us who graduated from Hunter, Beverly, myself, none of us got good guidance from the guidance department. And I mentored a Hunter student 20 years after I graduated, and she was told the same thing that we were told when we were attending Hunter, which was that we should go to City College, right? That we weren't qualified or able to do Ivy League level work. So we sat in the student lounge over Bidwis and Boone's Farm. This is why we look so good, because we have formaldehyde preserved. And we took the list of competitive colleges, divided it up amongst ourselves and said, you apply here, you apply here, you apply here. That's how we got into Princeton. Okay, we didn't have any guidance. But today students can, as Janice said, they can do that research for themselves. You can go check out the schools and see what they look like and how people are treating you. And my students at Howard were some of the best students I have ever taught. And I taught at Columbia, I taught at Rutgers, and I ended my career at UF. Those students at Howard were top notch, had top scores coming in, and there's few that could hold a candle to them. So I encourage, if there's any students on, I encourage you to consider going to an HBCU.
Could I share my screen for a second?
Sure.
Okay.
The tech people, yeah, have to.
I'm good. Hey, I'm a teacher. I know how to share screen.
Okay.
Okay. I'm trying to get this to close though. Okay. All right. I pulled this off the internet. Now, you can disagree with US News and World Report rankings, you know, because they're not always valid, but I want you to see this. I pulled this up because somebody asked about why would you go to an HBCU rather than a top tier university? And I was kind of upset by that question because it's assuming that HBCUs are inferior, and they are not. So here's Howard. It ranked number 89 out of every university in the country. And look, this goes to what Ernestine was talking about. They were number 21 in best undergraduate teaching. You can go to, you know, Harvard and Yale and Princeton, where they each have, you know, a couple of dozen Nobel laureates on the faculty. You're not going to interact with them as an undergrad.
That's right.
They might show up once and give the somebody distinguished lecture, and they'll let you in. But the actual undergraduate teaching, they're not into that. Okay, so Howard ranked number 21 out of everywhere in the country for undergraduate teaching. Best value schools, most innovative, top performers on social mobility. That's what the students that Michelle was talking about, those kids, they're not trust fund babies who she was teaching in law school. Okay, they came in there and they graduated with top level jobs. Okay, we're number 2 under historically Black colleges and universities. Number 1 is Spelman, as Ernestine knows. But to be honest, it's kind of like comparing apples and oranges, because Spelman is a small liberal arts college. Howard is a big university. So I don't even compare the two. They're just both excellent. And look at this. Ron will be interested in this. Number 94 out of every place in the country, best undergraduate engineering programs. So I just wanted to share that to dispel the myth that HBCUs are somehow inferior. Now, that said, sometimes they do have less resources, smaller endowments. That can be true. But somebody on here, I don't know who it was, somebody asked about which one needs my donations the most.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Pick one. Pick one. Mackenzie Scott, who went to Princeton and was the wife of Jeff Bezos, so she's like richest woman in America, I guess. She has started donating tons of money to HBCUs. But pick one. Doesn't matter who you pick. They all can use your money. And you don't have to be as rich as Mackenzie Scott. So that's all I gotta say. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a few minutes left, but I do have a question for the panelists, because we're talking a lot about guidance counselors not really having the information or the desire to encourage students to go to HBCUs, give them the proper information. Do HBCUs, do they have their own recruitment programs that goes into high schools? Or the schools that you're familiar with?
Norfolk State does. And a lot of times we can recruit students, particularly through programs like dual enrollment, but they're local. You know, those are the classes that students can take and get college credit for. At least speaking for Norfolk State, I will say that because many of our staff and our faculty are so stretched, we have so many things to do. When they do things like that, they do it out of their personal commitment to the institution. But sometimes we look for other things, and I was looking for a way to get this in there. Sometimes the ambassadors for our schools are things that, like the extracurriculars, like the bands, right? So you may have seen lately, Norfolk State was in the Rose Bowl. And today I looked at the Today Show, and Virginia State University was on the Today Show, and they were actually playing. So a lot of times we have to use other means, non-traditional types of means, to get attention to our schools and for our students. The band is one of them. Sometimes a lot of the clubs, I know Norfolk State does the Battle of the Brains. And so sometimes students will see other students, and that will be a very strong recruitment tool for us.
And also
now, no, go ahead, Janice.
Okay. Also, when my daughter was applying to college, Hampton and Howard had weekends.
Yes.
Where they invited high school students to come. I think Hampton called it the Scholars Weekend.
Yeah.
I forget what Howard called it. But they put her up in a dorm with current students who were like ambassadors, and they had all kind of activities. The Terpsichorean program, Jackie, that they have.
Yes, the dancers program, yes.
Yeah, they invited her to that. They had all kind of special programs. They had a brunch, and parents were welcome too. Howard had a weekend, and they started it out with the marching band and the Ooh La La girls, and so I don't know about all of them, but I know Howard and Hampton do have outreach.
Yeah, and Hampton, the New York alumni chapter of Hampton is extraordinarily strong, and they do a lot of recruiting in the New York area. I could find out who is in charge of some of that information and get it back to you. But the New York alumni chapter of Hampton is very, very strong.
And Howard probably is, I only know about the Atlanta chapter, but the Howard alumni chapter, which is for all of us, but mostly for undergrad, in Atlanta, is very strong and very active with the high school students. So I would imagine New York has a chapter too. I mean, they have to. Yeah.
Well, thank you, everyone. It's 8:30. So we've had a really good discussion about HBCUs, and as many of our discussions, it could go on much longer, but it's a work night. So, and I'd like to thank our panelists. I'd like to thank Janice and Ernestine and Ron for agreeing to participate and to share their stories with this group. I'd like to thank each of you for coming and participating and sharing your own stories. We're appreciative of that. And, Diversity Committee is really has a mission to connect with alums, and especially all alums, but really to form connections with alums of color and alums of other diverse groups, so that we can maintain our Hunter community as well, and let you know what's going on in Hunter, and let everyone know what's going on in Hunter. But there have been times, and I've heard feedback that some people have had experiences within Hunter of being isolated and not connected. So As an alumni association, we're trying to maintain and increase our connections, and also to let you know what's going on with the students. So, you know, read the alum notes, the announcements on our websites. There's a lot going on, and you know, we welcome you to participate in all the virtual programs that the Alumni Association is putting on. So I'd like to say thank you again. Thank you to Kinshasa and to Tom for their tech support with this event. And with that note, good night, everybody.
Good night. Thank
Good
you.
night.
I'm
Bye.
trying to get to my 50th reunion, so I hope I see you there.
Okay, so that's this year?
Yeah, in June.
Okay, yes, yes. Look forward to that. Okay, thank you. Good night.
Good night.